Welcome to the Envelopes Emmy Contender Series. I'm Yvonne Villarreal for the Los Angeles Times. Today we're talking to Peter Sarsgaard, who plays Martin Schmidt in the TV series The Looming Tower. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
So The Looming Tower is based on the Lawrence Wright book of the same name, which sort of unpacks the lead up to 9/11. And I wanted to first start with, I know when this series premiered, it got a lot of us talking about where we were on 9/11. So share with us where you were.
I was in downtown Manhattan, around Canal and West Broadway, down there. And my girlfriend at the time lived on Bowery, kind of near Prince. And so I was down around that area, that day and in the weeks afterwards. Yeah, I think for me, in an emotional event like this, it's like everyone's first reaction is just to lick their wounds. It's completely understandable. But it's just like if you have a relative who died of a drug overdose, not everybody wants to talk about the heroin problem on the day of the funeral. So I think for a long time, I, like a lot of other people, I was scared a little bit too, but also just not interested in talking about the hows and whys of what had happened. So when this book came along, I think it came along like 2007, really went after all these questions that we had all been either too afraid to ask or people weren't providing answers for. One reason or another, they had not been put out there.
What do you remember about when you finally read the book?
Well, the book is just extraordinary, and I really recommend that anyone who's into the series, or even someone who's not into the series, to read the book. I mean, it just has so much detailed information on how we arrived at that day, starting all the way back from Qutb, Qutb, I can't pronounce his name, but the gentleman who was here, who got radicalized in Colorado and went back to Egypt, and Muslim Brotherhood basically started around him after he was martyred. And to go all the way through the Wahhabis, in Saudi Arabia to that day in our own institutions, CIA and FBI. It's like a way through the grieving process. I think it's a very important thing to consider now.
When you were sort of enlisted for this project, there have been other projects that have tried to explore 9/11. Do you remember thinking it's not the right time for those, and what made you feel like it was the right time for this one?
I think this is the first one that really got into, for me, that I saw, that it got into the details of how and why. Like Oliver Stone's movie or Paul Greengrass's movie, both of those films are about different aspects of it. I think Oliver Stone's movie is about how the day after that event, everyone came together in a more profound way than we had experienced in a long time or since. And it's a kind of raised the flag movie for me, and about the personal tragedies that happen. Paul Greengrass's is like the anxiety of being on one of the actual airplanes. So this is a larger look at it, and I hope if the show continues, that we'll continue to take a different look at it from different angles about how terrorism, the thought of it, affects our behavior, how we deal with it, how a lot of times it's like biting off the head one to make four more. I think it can be very informative for right now, the time we're in right now.
Did it help you process what had happened, and were you ready to process it?
I didn't think much about 9/11 as I was doing it, because the whole season is pre-9/11.
Yeah.
I only have a couple of scenes after, and I play someone who's quite defensive about his own involvement, which is, of course, to me, very natural behavior. I don't actually anticipate anything else from people normally. So I don't find the person that I play, who's a composite character, to be the person where we should put blame if there's a person. You just sort of see the way that human behavior leads toward things like this, and it's one thing sets off another thing, sets off another thing.
Like you say, you play a composite character, Martin Schmidt, who is sort of the head analyst of the CIA. That's like sort of
the ALEC station.
The Al Qaeda unit. talk about what was that freeing to play someone that was a composite versus someone based on.
It's way better. I always treat them as composite characters anyway. I mean, it's so strange to impersonate anyone on any level. I mean, we're taught as children that it's a not nice thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So it always has felt very strange for me, and I've played a lot of real life people. I very rarely have ever worried much about being them so much as in a way that's more vigorous, more vigilant, monitoring my own self-respect, only doing what I could imagine actually doing through the path that this person went through. So to honor myself and their point of view is a large part of, I feel like, what my job is. We have to start making this funny now.
I don't know how. I don't know how.
I know, it's not a funny movie.
How was it for you on the set? I mean, like, what did you guys do?
Well, Jeff sort of plays his guitar, which he wears headphones for, so he hears. Mostly it's just a practice guitar all the time.
All the time.
And has a Tigers baseball game on all the time. But yeah, you know, he's a really intelligent, interesting guy. And I always enjoyed his energy. You know, I felt like we were playing people that were going at each other all the time. So it wasn't like we were, you know, celebrating each other's birthdays or anything.
Yeah. You guys really go at it.
Yeah.
And he's actually his character is based on John O'Neill, who was the chief
who
of
died in 9/11.
Yeah. Chief of the FBI in New York. Speaking of that, I mean, you guys do talk about playing these two sort of agencies that can't quite work together.
Yeah.
That they want ownership of everything. They don't want to let each other in, like the sort of turf wars that are going on. How frustrating was that for you?
I mean, I hope and I think that it would be behavior that was familiar to audiences. You know, like, this is the way our relatives act with each other. This is the way we act with each other. It's just the fact that I think a lot of time we hold agencies and government and certain different people up to a different standard than we ourselves even do. So I know we have great reason to be very critical of the government right now. I think, and I do think particularly so. But it's also like the onus is on us. We are the revolutionaries. We are the people that carry the Constitution. It's our responsibility. The people are bigger than the government. And I think just make your own neighborhood what it should be, you know, and let that positivity spread, you know, and that's the best economic message too, anyway.
Why do you think they just couldn't work together? It was personal?
It was personal. It had to do a lot with personalities. It also has a lot to do with what the missions of each one of those agencies were at the time, and I think that they overlapped sometimes and were conflict in others. You know, I mean, if you're an analyst putting together a story about what someone has done to try to figure out what they might do in the future, you don't want them to disrupt the flow of important information that you're getting that's the little bits that they're putting together the story with. So the more people you involve, the more chance there is of that, I think, on some level. I don't think the people at Alex Station, I think they just wanted to protect this country like any of those agencies do. No one was doing anything that was malicious. It was more a kind of arrogance, you know.
Because it was a composite characters, what did you sort of like hold on to in terms of developing the character? I mean, this is somebody, he's working with all women. How did that sort of inform what kind of character he was for you?
Certainly informed the way that I talk to men, you know. I remember Jeff complaining. There was one day we were filming and they said, they shot his coverage over my shoulder and they went to go shoot my coverage over his shoulder. And when they were doing it there, they said, your eye line is way off away from him. And I said, well, I think that's because I'm not looking at him when I talk to him. And so they moved the camera over there, and they did another shot of where I was actually looking,
Uh-huh.
and then also shot this one. And then, you know, when they start to do things like that, you realize, oh yeah, it's much easier for me to look at all the women that I work with than it is at my adversary directly.
Uh-huh.
You know, and it's interesting when you realize that your own behavior is leading the way, and you can think about it later. You go, oh, that's probably why. You know.
How about, what were your conversations like with Dan in doing this project?
I'm just a huge fan of his talent. You know, very basic, which is the way that I like to keep it. You know, he has a very different point of view and job on this than I do. Mine is such a certain angle. And the main thing about working with Dan is he really respected what I wanted to do. You know, what I wanted to do in scenes wasn't always maybe even exactly what was intended on the page.
Right.
And to be able to play something, even though it's a real event perhaps, or a composite real person, or talking to real people, to not have the onus of like, exactly how do you think they would have been? To actually be able to just pursue your own character is very nice.
What sort of research went into this? I mean, before doing this project, you were on Wormwood, where you played a biologist working with the CIA. Did that sort of help you a little bit? Like,
well, I'd read Legacy of Ashes, which is a book about the CIA, so the history of the CIA, I felt like I knew basically. Not any better than I needed to, but well enough. And it's interesting. So, yeah, you know, Wormwood actually has more to do with the movie that I just did, which is a kind of surreal comedy about a guy who maps sound in the city, the different frequencies that are predominant in each neighborhood.
wow.
So like the financial district is an F sharp minor. The Central Park is of course G major. And then he goes around and goes into people's apartments and tunes their appliances to try to make them feel better. And there was a trippiness to that reminded, you know, it's not always literal like that. Like both of them have the CIA in it. But I do find myself occasionally as an actor going back over a familiar ground, and it might be from years ago. I'll be like, oh, later I'll even maybe sometimes think that was like that, you know.
Was there something then from the past that helped you with finding Martin or in this role that you didn't
Being
think?
around a lot of really smart people,
That
you know. No, also even growing up, being around people that had that sort of, you know, the loneliness of the narcissist.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I bet they feel like a certain, you know, Atlas sort of vibe, like they're carrying the world on their shoulders, and that only they know. I do think that even our president thinks of himself as somebody who has extra special intelligence, and probably thinks of himself as being the only one who knows. And it's a dangerous place to be.
Who was Martin to you then?
Who was he in my life? I actually had a soccer coach that was a lot like Martin.
Soccer coach.
Oh my God. I had a soccer coach that would say things like, if you're gonna barf, barf in the woods. Or, yeah, I mean, everything with him was basically like maximum effort and play through injuries and total commitment for his team, you know, and he was a coach of teenagers, and it was very competitive level, but it was also pretty absurd if you think about it, that he cared that much, you know. He would say things like, it doesn't matter how you play the game. It only matters if you win or lose.
Wow.
And anything else that anybody says is just to make you feel better.
That would be so taboo right now, where everything's about you're all winners.
No, he was like, why else are we playing a game and bothering to keep score?
Why didn't you become a soccer player, Peter?
I wasn't good enough, yeah. like my dream of what I could have been is definitely always been a soccer player, like my childhood dream.
That was your childhood dream?
Yeah, but it's an absurd dream. But it was, when I fantasized about, I never fantasized about being an actor at all, until I was one. So
what led you here?
To being an actor?
Uh-huh.
It was just, I happened to be led into an acting class after I stopped playing soccer. And I did it because of, I think a woman who was in the acting class. And then when I first acted, I realized I was good at it.
What was your first thing that you acted in?
I did a play called Bent, which is a really impossibly upsetting play, where a gay man in Nazi Germany has to have sex with a dead woman to prove that he's straight. And then he recounts that experience to another person.
Wow.
And this is a play that was a very hugely successful and respected play, but that was the scene that I was doing.
Wow.
And that I was able to even kind of imagine those circumstances surprised me,
How old were you?
19.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it changed you? You were like,
I
this
just
is
felt
it?
the power of being able to do it. It wasn't even like that I loved it necessarily, but that I felt that I had a power, you feel powerful doing it. I also had never enjoyed being in front of people or anything like that,
Wow. Was your family like a family that watched a lot of TV or movies, or no?
No.
Wow.
I saw very few movies until I was a teenager.
Wow.
I mean, a few. I saw like Arthur,
Mm-hmm.
like everybody else. That was like one of my favorite movies. I think that and anything Peter Sellers was in,
Uh-huh.
I loved.
Interesting.
And anything that Ruth Gordon was in.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, Geraldine Page.
Wow.
Geraldine Page was probably my first, thinking about acting, wow, she's really doing it,
Mm-hmm.
actor, that I paid attention to.
Interesting. That's very cool. How about, with this character, what struck you about what you were playing? Like, what struck you about this story? What was your takeaway from it?
One of the interesting things to think about just in terms of what the CIA does is that there's a great imaginative leap that happens all the time. And that if you think about it as a place where people are using their imaginations, that it's not corporate.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be empathic, a very powerful empathic organization that can sit around and literally think about evidence pieced together from 1,000 miles away and think about what that person might feel and want to do next.
Right.
That's if they were really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt like acting to me.
Mm-hmm.
That felt like what I do. So in a way, I was like, wow, I wonder if I would have been a good analyst.
I was going to say, I can't imagine being in that type of position, but you're
I
saying
can.
you can.
Yeah, because it seems familiar to me
Uh-huh.
on some level. Not politically.
Uh-huh.
I'm very wildly against so much that the CIA has done, including, political assassinations in other countries and ours. So, over time, if you look at the organization, there's a lot to criticize. But I do believe that it involves a part of being human that's very interesting. That I don't see how you could be cold-hearted and be good at that job.
Mm-hmm.
And I say and be good at it.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot of cold-hearted folks
Yeah.
doing it, but yeah.
Did
It should be all women. Maybe that's why.
Maybe that's
Alex
maybe
Station.
that's what it is.
How about this as an organization where they don't hire men?
I'm for it. Did it make you think about news differently, or make you a more critical person watching the news, particularly with this current administration?
I mean, critical is the understatement of the year. I mean, it's difficult to consume news, I think the main thing is to not get sidetracked by the salacious, because that's what happened with Monica Lewinsky, and that's what took our eye off of Al-Qaeda, really. It's one of the things, is that we're always interested in that stuff more. And if that's one takeaway from me from it, it's like I was thinking of that time and I thought I was paying attention to Monica Lewinsky. When 9/11 happened and I was right downtown, I thought, this is Osama bin Laden. Like, I knew his name because of the previous bombing, but I hadn't really thought about it. And I think for a lot of people that day, when they started saying it's Osama bin Laden, we went, oh yeah, that guy that's just been standing there the whole time. So I worry that we're getting into a similar territory like that now, and with the way information even comes to us, and people have this thing on their phones where it delivers, you know.
You get the alerts
You
all
get
the
the
time.
alerts, and the alert could be like, you know, boy trapped in a refrigerator eats own foot. You know, it could be something that's like, what? Or it could be Kim Jong-il is threatening Japan. You know, you don't know.
You don't know. We're going to take some questions from fans, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
A fan on Twitter asks, who is an actor you look up to and why?
You know, I really like Ralph Fiennes. I think he just has a quality that's so interesting and enjoyable. And I've seen him on stage, and he's fantastic. I also saw Michael Gambon in a play a couple of years ago that I went to 3 times because I couldn't get over what a beautiful voice he has, and also just incredible presence of an actor. 2 of them, Peter Sellers, I always really liked. Geraldine Page.
Okay. Another question is, what is your favorite genre to act in?
I mean, if it's a really good comedy. And the problem with comedy is there's nothing worse than telling bad jokes all day long. So, you know,
hard.
It's hard to find a good comedy. And when I'm in scenes that are comedic, it's easy to have a good time.
We had someone that asked if it's harder to play a CIA agent when it's a true story leading to a sort of catastrophic event versus maybe when it's not based in reality. I don't know if you...
Well, yeah, I mean, with that event in particular, right, it's 9/11. To get involved in it at all seems dangerous, you know, to everyone involved. It seems, my wife said something about 9/11 after it happened that offended some people. I guess I understand. I mean, she said enough time has passed since 9/11 that we can start to think about the ways in which we are responsible. She didn't mean our fault.
Yeah.
She meant responsible, take responsibility, figure it out so it won't happen next time. And the backlash was so major that I thought, God, how is anyone ever going to talk about this at all? You know, the idea is that we just can't say anything. So
touchy subject.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the great things about this was that, you know, we had a documentary filmmaker involved. We had Larry, who wrote the book, who won the Pulitzer, that was the most detailed account of it that I had read. And Dan Futterman is an excellent writer, and all these people involved, that it seemed like, okay, maybe we can get at it somehow.
Did it take you a while to sign on? Was there any hesitation? Yeah.
Yeah. Took me a long time.
How long did you mull it over?
I think 5 months.
Wow.
It came and then went away and then came again.
What finally was like, okay?
I hadn't stopped thinking about it, you know. It's hard for me to figure out all the time if I want to do something. It's never, my wife really is lucky because she has this. She has like a real, that's the one.
Gut thing.
She knows, yeah. And she knows when she's faking it too. I mean, she might do it anyway, but she knows that it's not in the gut. And for me, I only really find out once I'm in the middle of doing it, you know. I'll be like, uh-oh.
What's an uh-oh project? I want to know.
They're obvious.
We're going to end things with a lightning round to sort of lighten the mood too. So just whatever comes to mind.
Yeah.
Last show you binge watched?
Oh, Wild Wild
Country?
Country.
Yes. If you could go back and be on any TV show ever, what would it be?
I would have liked to have been the voice for the shadow.
Ooh, that's good.
Who knows what evil lurks in the minds of men? The shadow knows.
Maybe there'll be a reboot. A lot of people watch TV to unwind. What do you do to unwind?
Eat.
Favorite spot?
Home.
Home. Good.
My refrigerator. Standing at my refrigerator door.
With dark chocolate or cheese?
Both.
What do you know now that you wish you knew on your first acting job?
That I'm allowed to say no.
Have you ever been fired from an acting job?
No.
Good. You're fired.
Yeah.
Which Golden Girls character do you most identify with? Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, or Sophia?
Blanche. That's obvious. I mean, really.
I mean,
Yeah. You know who I really the show for me growing up was Alice.
Ooh.
You know, the diner
Yeah.
thing. And yeah. And the woman who played Flo, the second one,
The second one.
is an
camera guy is
amazing actress.
Okay.
Celia Weston, who was also in Flirting with Disaster with the volleyball girls. I really think of her, she was in Dead Man Walking too, which is where I met her. I really think she's one of the finest actors around. She's really the bomb.
She's really the bomb.
She really is. Well, kiss my grits.
Well, Peter, thanks so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thanks.
And to all of you, if you want to see more of our Emmy chats, head over to elletimes.com.